Hello, everyone. Hi, my name is Todd Herring. I am the Director of Creative and Communications with Art Prize. We're so glad that you are here in our space. If you come back in September for Art Prize, this room will be transformed into what we call the STEAM Village. You'll see last year's winners on display. This is our Hub HQ, so it's the year-round offices of Art Prize. So just on the other side of the building, there are 16 people that work year-round to put the event together. And we couldn't be happier to have this partnership reach this new level. This event, this one in particular, the Symposium, the amount of work that goes into pulling it off is amazing, and the least that we can do is offer you our building to host it in. So thank you so much for doing it here and for all the work that everyone's putting into it. It is my pleasure to introduce to all of you Nili Broyer from the University of Illinois at Chicago. Nili is a PhD candidate in the Disability Studies program at the University of Illinois, and she is a scholar, artist, and member of UIC's program on disability, art, culture, and humanities, and bodies of work, a network of disability, art, and culture. So if you would please help me in welcoming Nili Broyer.
I was thinking about biomechanics, and one of my partners was an amputee, and we worked a lot together on problems with his prosthetics. So, anyway.
Let's talk more. You want to go to dinner, maybe?
Okay. So in my talk, I offer the concept of Crip design as a new form of critical design meant to challenge normalcy and make room for unconventional ways of being and acting in the world. Before I go into a deeper explanation of this term, I wish to start with a short example from everyday life. In an interview by Judith Butler, the disabled artist and activist Sonora Taylor expresses her avoidance of carrying a cup of coffee with her mouth when in the public sphere. She says, I can go into a coffee shop and actually pick up the cup with my mouth and carry it to my table. But then that becomes almost more difficult because of just the normalizing standards of our movements and the discomfort that causes when I do things with my body parts that aren't necessarily what we assume that they are for. Taylor's ability to carry with her mouth is practical and useful, but since it defies the basic normalizing standards, it causes discomfort to such a level that she decides not to do it. Tubin-Sibbers draw attention to this everyday reality of disabled people in his body theory. Beside the transformative potential that he identified in the lived body, Sibbers emphasized that people with disabilities want to be able to function, to live with their disability, to come to know their body, to accept what it can do, and to keep doing what they can for as long as they can. Following Sibbers, I recognize that enabling disabled people to function in our own particular way is part of our liberation. However, this is an ableist world that we are living in. It demands that we perform and present ourselves in specific ways. For instance, to carry the coffee cup by hand and not with our mouth. Society assumes that there is a correct way to move, to communicate, and to take up space. According to Michel Foucault, within modern states, bodies are being constantly regulated, controlled, and subordinated. Embodiment that successfully follows the dominant social norm is usually taken for granted and is privileged as such. Able-bodiedness and able-mindedness are constructed as natural and normal. Normalcy is comfortably transparent and requires no special attention. Disability, on the other hand, creates a commotion. I adopt this concept of commotion from Kerry Sandel and Philip Aslan, their book titled Bodies in Commotion. Disability is the unexpected otherness. It is commonly understood as deviance, a lack, a burden, a pathological state of being, and ultimately a problem that requires a solution. In their article, The Normality of Doing Things Differently, Nancy Hansen and Chris Philo describe how the overt presence of disabled bodies is treated as a form of trespass, unwanted or disruptive to silent conventions. As Foucault's work shows, doing things differently is dangerous. Unruly bodies, including disabled bodies, are being confined or live under a real fear of confinement. A shout out also for Liat Ben Moshe and other people important work on confinement and disability. When people with impairment manage to escape confinement and to take up space in the public sphere, they are pressured to assimilate, to pass as non-disabled, or to minimize as much as possible the appearance of their differences. David Mitchell and Sharon Snyder term this current conditional acceptance as inclusionism. They explain that under neoliberalism, disability is tolerated only, and I quote, as long as it does not demand an excessive degree of change from relatively inflexible institutions, environment, and norms of belonging, end of quote. Under contemporary trends of disability rights, accessibility, inclusion, and diversity, disability indeed receive more public visibility. But still, disabled body minds, as Margaret Price refers to them, continue to be regulated and controlled through inclusionism. Instead of doing things differently, disabled people are expected to pursue normalcy and to act the same as others. Thus, there is an urgent need to envision a then and there where different bodies do different things. I recognize this need to be an integral part of Alison Kafer's vision of accessible futures. My modest contribution to this vast project is the potential praxis of Crip design. Crip design could be understood as the disability version of what Anthony Dunn coined as critical design. Together with Fiona Raby, they explained that critical design rejects how things are now as being the only possibility. It provides a critique of the prevailing situation through design that embody alternative social, cultural, technical, or economic values. In his book, Design Meets Disability, Graham Pulling explains that critical design is often deliberately ambiguous and uncomfortable and may employ humor. He indicates that so far critical design is rarely ever applied in the context of disability. So at its basic level, Crip design is a push to promote the implementation of critical design within the realm of disability. Nevertheless, at a deeper level, I suggest that Crip design has the potential to transform critical design. Sandal's concept of cripping invites us to examine how cripping critical design might reveal able-bodied and able-minded assumptions and subvert ableist practices of exclusion. I will present a quick example to explain the necessity to critical design. On the slide, there is an image of a table with a seashell sitting named courtesy table. Through this product, the designer Marlene Jensen examines table manners. She creates a table where each person depends on the others staying in their seat. As the picture below shows, when one leaves the table and gets up from her seat, the other person finds himself on the floor. For our purpose, I label this innovative table as a critical design since it exposes taken-for-granted assumption and provokes us to rethink independency by enacting interdependency. Interdependence is known as one of the disability community counter-values. In that sense, the design of the courtesy table is compatible with disability culture. Yet, at the same time, this design reinforces ableist assumption. Able body minds are the ones being expected and capable of using this product. It seems that this table was not designed for disabled people, and that those who try to use it may turn into what Rosemary Garland Thompson termed as misfits. Garland Thompson argues that becoming a misfit is a material process that occurs within space and time. She explains that through a dynamic encounter between the flesh and the world, some bodies are transformed as disabled. In contrast to this demonstration of critical design, I move to a proposal of Crip design that, in the words of Paul Langmuir, does take disability as its starting point. This example is my own idea of an imaginable drinking fountain that also provokes interdependence. In this fountain, the part where the small jet of water emerges is located at a distance from the button which controls the flow of water. That way, a person who wants to drink becomes dependent on another person to press the button for him. Both elements, the place where the water emerges from and the button, should be accessible to a large variety of people with and without disabilities. The two parts are universally designed to allow the drinker as well as the occasional bartender to have an impairment and still adopt either of the roles. To expand on this point, it is relevant to mention that in the scarce example that Poulin presents for the intersection between critical design and disability, the design's applications are kept strictly for the use of disabled people. Conversely, I stress that there is a need to consider the truthful political effect of Crip design when it is being used both by disabled and non-disabled alike. Crip design enables and/or imposes on its user non-normative practices. On the one hand, Crip design is intended to validate disability and to support the transformative move that Vic Finkelstein points to for a full recognition of our differences. In that sense, it is connected to the affirmative model of disability, to disability culture, and to Crip humor. On the other hand, this alternative design is meant to challenge power relations, to disrupt performativity, and to destabilize the hegemonic notion of the human, meaning that Crip design is meant to affirm disability while also to contaminate normalcy. The two previous examples that I presented, the table and the drinking fountains, are designed in a way that demands dependency and/or interdependency. Since dependency is devalued in Western society and is associated with disability, imposing it on normates, as Garland Thompson calls them, interferes with their performativity. It does not solely enable those who are conceived to be normal to perform an alternative embodiment. It's like not only a simulating disability through forced dependency, but rather Crip design is primarily intended to pull the normates out of their transparency. By contaminating normalcy with dependency, normalcy is being marked as a social construction, which requires permanent maintenance. Crip design urges us to acknowledge that to fit in is also situational and contextualized. It brings to mind the realization that a shift in the environment has the power to put normalcy in jeopardy. Potentially, the normates could become misfits. In that sense, Crip design follows Kafer's political relational model, since it repoliticizes both disability and ability within everyday life and everyday places. To illustrate the radical potential of Crip design, I suggest another imaginable design. This time, interdependency is examined within the space of public restrooms by manipulating the toilet flushing mechanism. Today, each public restroom stall has its own flushing mechanism, and person expected to be able to flush our own toilet while inside the stall. But what if we sabotage this option? Imagine What would happen if we switch between the mechanism so that I could not flush my own toilet, but instead control the flushing of the accessible stool next door? And vice versa, that the other person could flush my toilet. What kind of awkward encounters would be produced due to this kind of Crip design? The last point I wish to make is that Crip design adds to and differs from other design practices that revolve around disability. I suspect that in our neoliberal era, accessibility and even universal design undergo reduction into inclusionism. More often than not, they are thought of as what could be identified as a false promise of sameness. This line of thought can be demonstrated by the ramp. As a fairly clear and easy technical solution, the ramp enables entrance and movement of wheelchair users within a given space. By co-opting accessibility and turning it into a neoliberal ramp solution, accessibility is reduced to its lowest degree. Although we did so today, a couple of examples of how to redesign or rethink about the ramp, make it much more radical than neoliberal let us see it. Through this wishful thinking approach of the neoliberal way of thinking, the ramp supposedly takes out the environmental barriers and enables the disabled person to be just like everybody else. In contrast to this, Crip design purpose is to undermine the notion of sameness and to directly interfere with the taken for granted state of normalcy. By technically disturbing the common ground of everyday practices, Crip design unveils what Siebers calls the ideology of ability. In addition to that, Crip design is inspired by disability experience and disability embodiment and oriented toward difference. In that aspect, Crip design serves similarities with the practice of deaf space that centralize deafness and deaf culture. Yet, while accessibility, universal design, and deaf space privilege usability and try to solve the problem of disability, Crip design is meant to cause a commotion. Rather than avoiding the discomfort that disability bodily reality creates, Crip design flips discomfort on its head. Thank you.
Well, I would say we are having a great day. I think it's really nice. Everybody comes from different perspectives in this room and live stream, and how yesterday was about identity, and some people really relate to that very well, and then we move into design and how the information and the learning and the thinking that we did yesterday, we're hoping is transferring and making you maybe imagine these conversations in a deeper way than you might have if we just had them separate. So just want to say that we're going to take a little longer break now. I think that's kind of a good time. It's like the 7th inning stretch where, you just need a little more space and a little more brain rest. So please enjoy that, and then we'll be back for another presentation by Beth Bienvenue after the break. Great, thank you.